Welcome to episode 3 of Renewing the Conversation, a series of interviews where we talk to leading industry professionals and experts about renewable energy and heating, with a focus on the home and what challenges face the industry and homeowners.
Today we welcome Malcolm Farrow, Head of Public Affairs at OFTEC. In this interview, Malcolm talks to us about hydrotreated vegetable oil, a kerosene alternative that is sustainable and cuts emissions by 88%.
Before we get started, we want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, the MCS, which define, maintain and improve quality by certifying products and installers so homeowners can have confidence in the low carbon technology they invest in. To find out more, head over to www.mcscertified.com.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button below and please show us your support by giving us a thumbs up. Enjoy the interview. Hi Malcolm, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It is a very busy time in the industry and in particular for the energy sectors. There's been some big news this weekend about energy bosses having emergency meetings with the government. What is OFTEC's role in the industry? And what is your role with regards to helping alleviate some of these real serious concerns that are happening at the moment?
Okay, well, OFTEC is a trade association primarily. We represent manufacturers of equipment used for liquid fuel heating, so boilers and tanks and things like that. We have quite a lot of other important relationships. The second one is that we run a competent person scheme, which is really a registration scheme for installers and people who do maintenance work on heating equipment, particularly off-grid heating. We have about 10,000 of those installers currently on our books. We have around about 90 training providers as well. And they're an important cog in the wheel, really, in terms of ensuring that the people who go out and do work in consumers' homes are properly trained to do that. So they're the things that OFTEC does. We are very keen to try and work with government and other key people in terms of heat policy, really, and trying to make sure that we keep the right heating in people's homes and that they can afford to run it and it's there when they need it. So we're part of that discussion too.
Fuel poverty is a real issue in the UK, and I know that every winter there is real concerns, but this winter in particular, what is the biggest challenges and concerns for heating that you're seeing from your side of the industry for homeowners and for residents around the UK?
Well, you're right. Fuel poverty is a really big concern. We know that to some extent, people, particularly in the who use gas heating, have been protected from really high bills because there's a system in place that limits the amount to which bills can be increased. And really, that's really the problem that's happening at the moment for those people, because we're seeing the wholesale price of gas going through the roof. But the people who, the people who actually provide the fuel to the end user aren't able to increase the costs. And actually, in many ways, from the consumer's point of view, it's very good news that they can't. Otherwise, they really would be facing very high bills indeed. But the net consequence of that is that actual gas suppliers now are really facing an impossible situation where they're paying huge prices for the fuel, but they can't pass on those prices, which is why we're seeing the potential threat of some going out of business at the moment. The side that I'm involved with, oil heating, isn't so much affected because although the price of oil that we use for heating in the UK is affected by the crude oil price, that hasn't spiked to anything like as much as the gas wholesale price has. So to some extent, our customers have been protected to a degree. The other thing is that because they store the fuel that they use in tanks, a lot of people will have actually bought the fuel during the summer when the prices are traditionally lower. So actually, it's unlikely to have quite the same impact on rural households as it is on people who use gas. But that's not to say that fuel poverty isn't a major problem for these households. And we know, for example, that rural homes are typically less well insulated. And they're often older than urban and suburban properties. You'd be very affected by the price of fuel and heating anyway. So that's something to be very concerned about, I think.
So tell us about oil. That's your remit, is oil in homes. Are there multiple different types of oil that can go into homes, or is it just one type? You said that the oil is very much connected to the crude oil price. Does that wouldn't apply to all different types of oils though? So what kind of different types of oils are people burning in their homes?
For a start, you've got around about 4 million homes in the UK that don't use gas for heating. That's compared to around about 23, 24 million that do use gas. So it's a sort of niche sector. And of that 4 million, roughly about 1.7 million use oil heating. Now, here in the UK, we all use kerosene basically for oil heating, but that's not the same as people across Europe. A lot of people in Europe actually use diesel for oil heating. So here in the UK, we're slightly different in that respect. Because it's a fuel that's derived from crude oil, the price of that we pay for the kerosene we use in Great Britain and is really quite closely affected by the crude oil price. So you know, it's often been said that you know, the price of oil heating is more volatile than for other heating, because it does tend to be prone to those sort of you know, increases. But you know, if you follow the news, you'll sometimes see discussions about OPEC and how they're trying to increase the price that people pay for crude oil, and that can have an impact. But actually, over the last 5 or 6 years, the price of oil has been very, very low indeed. That's meant that the price that people pay for oil heating in the UK has been remarkably low, and actually it's been comparable to mains gas really over the last 4 or 5 years. Oil heating households have been protected from the worst effects of price rises, and I certainly don't think that they will be affected to the same degree this year that by the sort of prices we're seeing for gas rises.
So as the UK transitions towards net zero, obviously burning oil is going to be something that's going to have to get phased out at some stage. What are the alternatives in terms of fuels that are going to start replacing things like diesel and kerosene?
The government has made it clear really for several years now that it plans to take action to transition off gas grid homes, particularly those that use high carbon fossil fuels like oil, away from these fuels towards new technologies. You'll know that there's been some really big announcements about the plans to increase heat pump installations, and the government's got a target of 600,000 heat pump installations a year by 2028. Many of those will be in new builds, but that means there'll still be a lot that will have to go somewhere else. And I've no doubt that off-grid homes are seen as a key target for those heat pumps. I think that's going to be a harder challenge than many people realise. And as I mentioned slightly earlier, a lot of it will have to do with the cost of heat pumps and the retrofit costs that may be necessary for those homes as well. But there are other fuels that you can use off-grid as well. Although heat pumps are the government's probably preferred technology at the moment, there is a role for solid biomass, and some biomass heating systems have been installed. And we, within the oil heating industry, are looking at low carbon liquid fuels as another alternative, and that's something we're working on at the moment.
Tell us about those, because that sounds like that's going to be an exciting area that starts to develop quite quickly in the industry.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope that will be the case. We've already been working for some time on this, and we know that because we work with partners across Europe, that there's a lot of interest in this throughout Europe now. And really, I think it goes to the heart of the transition challenge, really, that I mean, we've seen for several years, since I think 2013 or 14, that the government has offered significant funding support to encourage people to move to heat pumps. But actually, the take-up has been relatively low. And I think part of that is because consumers really don't understand how heat pumps work, and also that the industry that supports them and the amount of installers that are available to carry out the installs is comparatively low. So it's something of a cottage industry at the moment, and I think it's been a challenge to see that develop at scale. But also there's the kind of hassle factor. I think consumers like things to be nice and easy, and particularly when people want to install a new boiler, it usually happens when the existing appliance fails. So you want to get the heating on quickly, needless to say, and at that point you don't necessarily have time to think about all the things that you might need to do if you want to install a heat pump, for example. We felt that actually this could be an opportunity to really make life easy for people, because instead of changing the boiler that they're using at the moment, why not change the fuel instead? This seemed like a kind of no-brainer, really, because it means that you avoid all the other complications. And I mean, that doesn't mean that adding better insulation to your home isn't a good idea, because of course it is. But for people that don't want to do that, we thought that changing the fuel would be a really easy win. So we've been working with our partners, the UKIFTA, who are the fuel distributor trade association in the UK, to bring this fuel to market. And we've already trialled it in a number of homes now, and we're really confident and pleased with the results that we've seen. The fuel is called hydrotreated vegetable oil, or HVO for short, but this is just one of several renewable liquid fuels that are likely to become available in the coming years. But this one is already commercially available, and it's used in transport mainly at the moment, but it will work equally well in your boiler with just a few simple conversion sort of changes. And we think the changes are likely to only cost no more than about £500 in most cases. So it's a really easy way to take a dramatic step towards a low carbon heating system.
So tell us about this. So just remind us again what it's called, and tell us how is it made and what vegetables is it made from, and just tell us a little bit more detail about it.
Yeah, it's called hydrotreated vegetable oil, but the name itself is slightly misleading. I mean, the hydrotreated bit means it's manufactured with a process that uses hydrogen. The vegetable bit is a bit sort of misleading, really, because the fuel we're using actually is made from waste products rather than vegetables. When people think about biofuels, they typically think about fuels that are derived from crops. So you grow a crop and that absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, and then you harvest that crop, convert it into a fuel, and then you burn it again, and that releases CO2. So you have a kind of a sort of a cycle there where you're not actually gaining any emissions. But what we're doing is, the concern with using crops is that there's a conflict between fuel and food. And obviously there's only a limited amount of space to grow food. And I think there are lots of quite legitimate concerns about using crops for fuels. So we're using waste, and this is it's typically food waste and all sorts of other things like that. Used cooking oil, particularly, is a key component. If the actual end result is the same, that you're using a product, recycling it, and turning it into the fuel, and that has a really massive impact on its carbon emissions. And you compare to kerosene that we're using at the moment, it's roughly an 88% reduction in carbon emissions.
Wow. Food waste is a really has certainly been a very hot topic in the last few years, and everybody's a lot more aware of landfills and what's going into landfills, and food waste is certainly one of those things that is really concerning, especially food that is potentially just discarded from restaurants, kind of leftovers, that kind of thing. How is that what you're using, and how are you accessing that?
Most of it is used cooking oil, and this is really oils that are being used in part of industrial food processes and things like that. And so there's quite an easy recycling option to make that happen, really. I mean, and I think you're right, actually, that there is all the massive amount of potential to increase waste capture, and particularly food waste. And we all know about the sort of the news things we see about fatbergs blocking up sewers. So there's lots of practical sort of advantages to trying to recycle more of this stuff. But I mean, in the UK particularly, and actually in Europe too, I think the capabilities to actually capture a lot of this food waste is really quite limited at the moment. One thing we'd absolutely like to see happen is for more of that more investment to take place to improve that. In the absence of that, a lot of the fuel we use, the raw material for it comes from, as I say, industrial food production and things like that. And some of it is currently imported into Europe, quite a lot of it. That raises sustainability questions. And, I think that's something that we have to be very careful about, really, because you don't want to be taking raw material from a different part of the world and just creating another problem there.
It sounds like a really interesting area that really does need exploring, because is it really as basic as being able to say, okay, from a governmental level or policy level, let's look at, as you said, the manufacturers, let's look at the fast food industry. I mean, talking about oil waste, you're looking at McDonald's, Burger King, all these companies that could potentially sign up and get involved. Surely, for them, trying to get rid of their used oil is a headache anyway. So for them to be able to sign up to something where they can get rid of it and have that kind of sustainable initiative as part of their company policies and be able to talk about that. So is it something that you're talking to the government about? How can we implement this, not just as getting the manufacturers involved, but getting a lot more other sectors involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the climate crisis affects all sectors of all our economies. I think that's an absolutely key point here. We're talking today focusing mainly around heating, But actually, all processes need to decarbonize, and the sectors involved in food processing and creating, a lot of the things we see in the shops are no different, really. And I know that there's an awful lot of work already going on that side, looking at exactly these issues, really. And some of the big food chains like McDonald's, I think, have got schemes in place where they are already capturing the used cooking oil and using it actually in some cases. Don't quote me on this, but some are definitely using it to fuel the vehicles they use for transporting their the stuff they make around. So this is already happening. But I think the key point is we need to expand it dramatically and just become much better at it.
You mentioned that earlier. You touched on that and said that this is a fuel that has been used in the transport industry before. Can you just tell us, expand on that? How long has the transport industry been using it? How widely are they using it? How reliable is it? Are they happy with it? Why has it not transitioned into homes before now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. The simple answer is it's been used in transport for some time in various types of renewable liquid fuels and biofuels. I mean, we already run our cars with a proportion of renewable fuel in them. So this is nothing new. And, there's been an expansion of petrol to E10, for example, recently, which is it means a higher component of renewable ethanol is being used in the fuel. We're also seeing that happening across other sectors too, like aviation and shipping. They're all looking for solutions to help them transition away from using fossil fuel. In a way, this is a kind of key argument, really, because a lot of people think, and I think this is quite sensibly, really, that actually, if you've got a finite amount of renewable fuel, you probably need to use it in the places that don't have a choice, where they can't use something other than a liquid fuel. Aviation is potentially the most obvious example of that. But this is a more complicated topic than just a sort of systemic approach. And you need to also think about the capacity for people to make changes to the way they live, really. And I think that the comparison with aviation is quite an interesting one, really, because a lot of flights at the moment are done by a relatively small proportion of society, and we often fly frankly, for quite frivolous things, really, like holidays and things like that, really. And is it better to be using a sustainable fuel for that, or is it better to use it to heat people's homes and actually keep them warm in the winter? So these are the sort of difficult choices that we have to kind of grapple with as a society, really. OFTEC and our colleagues, we feel that actually providing people with a low cost choice to help them decarbonize their homes is a really important one. We're not suggesting for a minute that the renewable liquid fuels that we're promoting are the only alternative. We think that where people can adopt heat pumps, they absolutely should be encouraged to do so, for example. We're working on providing training courses, and we hope to launch them very soon for the technicians that register with us, so that if they want to start offering heat pumps, they can be trained to do that in a way that will really help that transition. We know that a lot of homes are going to be very difficult to convert easily and will be very costly to do so. So we think for those homes, a liquid fuel could be a really good alternative.
The government have been just so vocal about heat pumps and air source. And as you said, they've set some really ambitious, bold targets, which has in some instances been quite controversial. From OFTEC's perspective, do you feel that maybe the government is kind of putting all their eggs in one basket, or really heavily focusing on one technology, just heat pumps? And do you feel that they need to be a little bit broader in actually looking at renewables and the renewable energy sector as a whole, and kind of being a little bit more balanced about trying to push lots of different areas? Are they giving you the right support?
That's a really good question. I mean, we would say that the government is probably putting a little bit too much emphasis on heat pumps at the moment, but that's with good reason, because we do know that heat pumps are going to be a key technology, and it's really important that a lot of attention is focused on improving their deployment. I mean, to get to 600,000 a year, which is the government's target, is going to be an enormous challenge. So I think they're right to try and focus on that. The counter argument is the government actually knows that there are going to be quite a lot of homes that will be unsuitable for heat pumps. We've seen a whole raft of different research carried out that shows that particularly for off-grid homes, there will be a significant cohort that can't really be economically converted to a heat pump without really just enormous unaffordable costs, really. For example, there are around about 40% of off-grid homes are in EPC bands E to G. And that compares to around about 20% for homes currently on the gas grid. So you've got a large proportion of old rural homes, perhaps built before 1920, that have got solid walls and are often detached and pretty remote in geographical terms, that will need a lot of investment, and not just to the homes themselves, but also to the electricity infrastructure grid to support that massively increased use of electricity if you wanted to convert to heat pumps, and also transition people to electric vehicles as well. We think actually it makes perfect sense to try and grow the use of renewable liquid fuels. And I have to say, we haven't had a lot of support from government so far. They're interested, but they haven't actually sort of put any funding our way to help us do it. So we as an industry have really picked that up, and we thought, well, we've got to make this happen for ourselves, and that's exactly what we're doing.
That is just not acceptable. I mean, as a member of the British public, I mean, I'm not involved in fuels, but just as a homeowner, I don't think that that's acceptable. I think that the government has got to start to support an array of different renewables, and renewable liquid fuels sounds like a really interesting
one of them. Yeah, I mean, heat pumps are just so unaffordable for a lot of people because it is a huge investment. I mean, you're looking for a rural property, and that's you're not even factoring in insulation and radiators. You're looking anywhere between £15,000 and £20,000 that you're going to have to invest.
Yeah. You
mentioned upgrading the boiler, maybe £500. My question to you on that would probably be, if you were to get maybe 1.5 million homes to be able to tweak their boiler to start using HVO, would you be able to supply all of those homes initially with the fuel, given that I would assume there's a finite amount of donuts and fish and chips that you're actually being able to process oil from? So would you be able to do that?
Yeah, that's a lot of chips, isn't it?
So basic.
You're right, basically. I mean, if the government were to come to us today and say, can you convert all those homes that currently use oil to HVO, the answer would have to be no, we couldn't. So you're looking for a phased transition, basically. And there are two ways you could do that. One, you could start with a blended fuel and gradually increase the proportion of HVO in that blend over time. And you could put regulations in place to make that happen, really. The difficulty there is that as you increase the blend percentage of HVO, you'd have to be coming back and making alterations to the boiler and things like that. That raises further, just complicates things for the consumer. So probably a better way to do it is to offer HVO as a 100% HVO fuel and convert homes gradually as perhaps as the boilers come up for replacement, convert them to HVO and make that a kind of one-time intervention, so that the homeowner only has to do that job once. By making those alterations, you effectively can then tick that home off. It's now running on a low carbon liquid fuel, and it's ready to help achieve the net zero target, basically.
I mean, I think that air source is a fantastic technology. I think that ground source is a fantastic technology. I think there's an awful lot of positives to those technologies. I think that from my personal perspective as a homeowner, I want choices. I want options, and I want options at different, as you said, convenience, price point, the hassle of changing all of your equipment or not changing it. I think that everybody has to be given choices. And I think that just kind of trying to force air source and really push that as hard as the government is pushing it, you end up with a portion of the public kind of almost resisting it because they feel like it's just being kind of really force-fed. They're being force-fed a technology that they not necessarily understand or can't necessarily afford. And I think that something like HVO, as you said, is giving homeowners additional options that are simpler and hopefully a little bit more affordable as well. And being able to just clean out your tank once and incur that cost, and then putting in the HVO one time is certainly seems to be a lot more reasonable and a lot faster for options for homeowners. What about the long-term costs of running HVO? What are the price points and the price point comparisons if I was to fill my tank up today with HVO and, you know, compared to, as you're saying, kerosene, if I was to run that through the winter? What is the comparison of price on burden on the homeowner this winter, for example?
Okay, well, at the moment, the real problem is that you'd be paying a lot more for your fuel if you change to HVO. And that's one of the key things that needs to be addressed really before HVO can be made widely available for heating. At the moment, if you were to use it in transport, you get a significant discount. Basically, there's a sort of government incentive scheme called the RTFO scheme, which basically means that the end user in transport pays roughly about half the full price that HVO would cost. What we're arguing is that same type of discount should be available for heating as well, really. And it's a pretty simple scheme, and it means that it would actually not affect the homeowner. They wouldn't even be aware that it's going on. It just means that the price they pay would be significantly lower. And at the moment, the other thing is that tax and duty on heating fuels are different to road transport. So we just want to see the government sort of change that to really make you achieve parity really for HVO used in heating. It's all ready to go basically, and we know that the fuel distributors are really ready to distribute it. And we also know that homeowners want it. There's a website that we've set up called Future Ready Fuels, which has got a little questionnaire on it. So we've asked people about what they think about their heating and whether they'd be interested in trialing this fuel. And you won't be surprised to hear that people are really keen on it. And actually, 98% of people that replied said that they would like to have this option. And I think you absolutely made the right point. It is all about choice. We think that consumers like to have choice, and it's actually important because it means that you get better competition between industries, and that will help to bring costs down for consumers as well across the piece, really. I think you
get more innovation. I mean, then you've got a lot of different sectors innovating, and that's what we need. And we need, to see a lot more, pioneering development into different areas. And I think that, at the moment, there is no silver bullet for heating homes. So until we start to innovate, we need to see ideas like this.
Definitely. I mean, and we're quite a good example of a home where we have got our oil tank still outside. Our heat pump is our primary source of heating, but we know that heat pumps drop the efficiency when you hit 5 degrees and certainly 0 and below. The efficiency really suffers. So we would love to be able to just switch over to a clean
low carbon oil
that basically kicks in, supports the heat pump, and basically, the bulk of your heating is actually clean. So without getting too technical, you mentioned that the boiler needs a bit of a tweak. What kind of work needs to get done to the boiler in order for it to be able to burn HVO?
Well, effectively, we need to replace the what's called the burner, basically, and it's just a component switch, and it's the sort of thing that can be done typically during any service visit. Really, so it won't take very long to do at all. And we would also, although you can actually put HVO straight into a tank on top of kerosene, we would normally not recommend doing that. Typically, we would suggest that the conversion happens when the supply of kerosene in the tank is already very low, and we would then take that kerosene out, clean the tank, which is again a relatively straightforward job, and then put the HVO in and switch the system over. So it could all be done in 2 or 3 hours. It's really not a difficult job at all.
Looking at, you said crop-based fuels. Obviously, we are aware of some of those. So, for example, palm oil is one, and that has obviously started to get a really nasty reputation with deforestation. With this, it just doesn't have those you're not going to have those issues. And it seems like a no-brainer because you're able to reuse a waste. Why is the government not getting involved in this? And are you expecting them to at least discuss it or touch on it at COP26 this year?
I don't know whether it will be discussed at COP, but I mean, to be fair to the government, they are they do keep in touch with us, so they know what we're working on, and we're very pleased that there is this engagement. And they've recently done actually quite a big biomass consultation. In a way, we have to overturn preconceptions, really, because there's been such a deep-grained assumption that renewable liquid fuels need to go to transport, that it's quite difficult to overturn that sort of thinking, really. And they're often just described as transport fuels, and we need to really sort of push back on that, really, for the reasons I gave. It's not to do with the fact that you couldn't convert off-grid homes to other types of heating like electric, but it does come down to the costs and the degree to which the consumer will be willing to pay that. And and as you've said, really, people are have all sorts of constraints. They're at different stages in their lives. Maybe if I was buying a home tomorrow in the countryside, before I moved in, I might want to do a whole load of improvements to it that might make it really easy and straightforward to put a heat pump in. Alternatively, I might already live in a house that I haven't got the money or wish to convert. Why not have these other choices available and make it easier for consumers?
You mentioned that you're a OFTECer of doing a trial. Can you tell us a little bit about the trial, and is it nationwide? Where are you focused on, and what's been the response?
We've converted about 20 homes across the UK at the moment, which doesn't sound like very many, but it really builds on work that's already going on across Europe. So we're part of a much wider trial, if you like. Here in the UK, we've done a relatively small number, but we've got quite ambitious plans for this coming winter. Our goal is to increase that to well over 100 homes, which would give a much broader demonstration, really, of HVO's capabilities, really. Because I think we've learned enough from the work we've done already to know that the technical challenges of using HVO in existing systems are very straightforward and readily solvable. So we've got a firm grip on that now. The goal is just to do a much wider range of homes, and that will be right the way across the country, from Cornwall and down in the southwest, right up into the north of Scotland. So we really do want to make the trial as broad as possible, to really absolutely show that this fuel is going to really solve a lot of problems for people. And, that is something industry is doing, and we are funding ourselves.
So in terms of performance, we know that kerosene kind of delivers about 10 odd kilowatt hours of energy per litre. How does HVO compare to that?
It's almost exactly the same. So you will notice virtually no difference at all in the performance of your oil heating system. So people call it a virtually a drop-in fuel, and that's exactly what it is, really. Apart from the modifications I've mentioned, you won't notice any difference, and it'll be just as efficient as it is now.
So with regards to the long-term plan, how soon can you see the UK kind of transitioning and making this available to homes? And how far away do you think we are from homes really being able to adopt this fuel in the future?
Okay, well, our demonstration project is set to happen again this winter. And I think once that's been concluded, we'll be very much close to being ready as an industry to start to introduce this fuel. The key thing that needs to make it happen is for the government to sort out the taxation and subsidy side of things, really, to make the fuel available at an attractive price for the end user. And once they put that measure in place, we as an industry are ready to deliver it. At a small scale, it could happen as early as next year. But I would say definitely by 2023, we will be ready to roll it out. As people need to replace their boilers, they could be switching to HVO as well. If the government takes the right steps to make that happen as well, we're ready to go. This
is a fuel that, as Mark said, from our perspective, and I don't think that we're going to be the only home in the UK, we've put an air source heat pump in, but we've still kept our oil boiler. And the reason why we did that originally was because we didn't really know what we were getting into with air source, and we didn't know how reliable it was going to be long term in a really harsh winter.
And how much we had to lean on it when the temperatures, I would assume, are going to get colder and colder as time goes on.
Yeah. So, for us, it's really nice to be able to have a clean fuel in our home that we know that is sustainable, low carbon, and that we also have the technology of the air source as well.
Yeah.
These are all fuels and technologies that can work hand in hand and really kind of support each other and help to, develop and give the industry more options and give homeowners more options. So I think it's a really exciting time. You must be You must be very hopeful about the future, and I'm sure, you know, hopefully once you've done the trial, you'll start to get a little bit more maybe funding for next year from the government. I would really hope so.
Yeah, well, we do too. I mean, it would be really great. I mean, I think with the government support, we can really make this happen. You know, I think there's so much evidence now that this is needed. You know, it's not just us saying it. The people behind the national grid, you recognise that they do a thing called the Future Energy Scenarios Study, which showed that, you know, there's an assumption that biofuels will be needed for that. Other reports have also shown that there are limitations to systems like heat pumps, and you know, the way you're using it potentially is a really good option. You can go down the hybrid route. You could use your oil boiler with a heat pump. You can use it with solar. There's all sorts of ways that you can integrate it other than just using it on its own. So I think choice is the thing, really. And I think people want good products. And, you know, I think, you know, again, you know, we've been using oil heating for 40 or 50 years in the UK. People are very familiar with it. We have all the infrastructure ready to deliver it now. So, you know, we just need to make these last few sort of steps to make it happen, basically.
Come on, UK government. Come on.
Get on board.
Fantastic. I think that's really exciting, and thank you so much, Malcolm, for sharing this news with us. And I think that certainly not something that I've heard of or know anything about. So it's just, it makes me really hopeful. It makes me really hopeful for the future that, you know, we are as a country really trying to roll out different options. And I think that, you know, heating is something that affects every single person in this country, and you know, it's something that is at the moment we're really seeing in the news, we're really seeing in the press, we're really acutely aware of just how much pressure is going to be on certain homes this winter. And the more options that we have, the more green options that we have available to people, renewables are most definitely the way forward. Keep going, and you know, we look forward to hearing all about how it rolls out. We would love to have you back maybe next year after your trial has finished, so you can tell us how the trial went, what your results were, and hopefully come back with some good news that you're getting some really good funding and support.
Well, that's really great. Thanks. I mean, it's been great talking to you today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work we're doing. And yeah, absolutely. Let's make it happen, and I'll come back and tell you more about it in the new year.
Brilliant.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Malcolm. Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.